heading up means simply pushing the tiller toward the sail, but you also have to bring the sail in a little bit. I'm sorry, toward the wind. So while you're heading up, again, this isn't part of the answer to the question, but it's something you have to know as a sailor. So if you're like over here in this position, and your sail is here, and you want to head up, yes, you'll push the tiller toward the sail, and the boat will start heading in that direction. But at the same time, with the other hand, you want to bring the main sheet in a little bit. So the more you head up, the more you bring the main sheet in. The more you bear off, the more you let the main sheet out. And you can see that on this chart here, that as the boat bears off more and more from the wind to away from the wind, the red line goes further and further away from the boat. Okay? So heading up toward the wind, pushing the tiller toward the sail, and you bring the sail in a little bit. Bearing off, tiller away from the sail, and you let the sail out a little bit. Any questions about heading up and bearing off? It's pretty simple. It's just tiller toward sail, toward the wind, tiller away from sail, away from the wind. And you're always going to know which way the wind's blowing by watching the telltales on your side sticks. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, we'll move on to the next section. The next section is very simple. It's just an exaggeration of heading up and bearing off. But it's maneuvering the boat as opposed to just turning the boat. Okay? I mentioned that you don't want to be stuck in irons. However, you do have to go through irons. You do have to make a turn that brings this boat through irons over to this side. You do have to zigzag through the eye of the wind. But why do you have to do that? This is the Mass Ave Bridge. This is the Longfellow Bridge. This is community boating. This is the island. And this is me. Okay. I'd say about 80% of the time that you're out there in the Charles River, the wind is actually going to be blowing from the Mass Ave Bridge down to the Longfellow Bridge. 20% of the time, that's not the case. Days like yesterday, it was just going all different directions. But most of the time, the wind will be coming from the Mass Ave Bridge down here to the Longfellow Bridge. So when you leave to go on your sail, you'll be going upwind. You'll be going into the wind. Well, I already mentioned that you can't sail directly into the wind. So this is your boat leaving the dock and coming around the island and going out to the river, and you want to go up there, you can't just go directly toward the bridge, because you can't go directly into the wind, you'll be stuck in irons. So how do you get to the other end of the river? Well, you have to zigzag. You have to keep going across the eye of the wind, passing through irons until you get to the other side. If you don't zigzag, well, you're just going to hit the other side of the river. If you go over this way, you'll hit the side of that river, that side of the river. So in order to go upwind, normally toward the Mass Ave Bridge, you have to be zigzagging. Okay, so how do you zigzag? Well, there's a maneuver called tacking or coming about. And this is one of the two maneuvers. It's sort of the simpler of the two. It's the upwind one. Tacking or coming about. Unfortunately, there are two words for the same exact thing. I wish there weren't. There's enough stuff for you guys to learn as it is. But this one just happens to have two words. Tacking and coming about mean the exact same thing. They're completely interchangeable, so you just have to kind of learn them both, and you can use whichever one you want. What tacking or coming about means by definition is maneuvering your boat so that the front of the boat goes through the eye of the wind, through irons, onto the other side. So it's basically going from a close-hauled course to a close-hauled course. So if this boat wants to go over to this side, that's coming about or tacking. If this boat wants to go over to this side, it's coming about or tacking. So again, by definition, it's moving your boat so that the front of the boat goes through the eye of the wind and onto the other tack and through irons. And your boom comes onto the other side, and you come onto the other side. Okay, that's coming about or tacking. And I'll show you a little toy boat on the board, how that's done. And incidentally, once I'm done showing you tacking and jibing, the other maneuver on the board, I'm going to quickly take you out to the boat on the dock. So it'll make a lot more sense if you see it out there than it does up on the board here. And then once you're actually on the water, it'll make a lot more sense than that. But I think it's hard to really grasp this by just these little toys on the board. But we'll see as much as we can teach you from that. Okay, so what tacking and coming about looks like is here's a boat that's on a close-hauled course. So it's as close to the eye of the wind as it can be without going into irons, and the sail is in pretty close. So how do you come about or tack? Well, the procedure is as follows. The very first thing you want to do, if you have a crew on board, crew just means anybody on the boat besides yourself, you want to let them know that you're tacking. Because the boom does come across, and if you're standing up or sitting on the side of the boat, you could get hit in the head with the boom, which is why it's called the boom. But when you're tacking, it's a gentle maneuver, and the boom won't hit you that hard, but you still don't want to get hit in the head with the boom. So you let your crew know that you're coming about by giving a universal signal of coming about, which is coming about. I only recommend giving the coming about command if there's actually other people on the boat. If you're by yourself, it look kind of silly. But if you want to use it for practice, that's fine. So you let your crew know you're coming about. Then what you do is as follows. You've got the main sheet in one hand, you've got the tiller in the other hand. The first thing you do is you vigorously shove the tiller over to the other side of the cockpit. The cockpit is the opening of the boat. So you don't want to shove the tiller past the end of the cockpit. So you won't basically want to bring the tiller to here, not way over to here. So you're shoving it as far as you can until you hit the other wall. If you go past the wall, then your rudder becomes parallel and there's no power in the tiller. So the first thing you do after you let your crew know you're coming about is you shove the tiller vigorously. Now when I say vigorously, the reason for that is if you were simply to gently head up, what's going to happen? You're just going to go into irons and you're going to get stuck there. But if you vigorously just kind of shove the tiller over all the way to the side, then you'll have enough momentum for the boat to actually turn through the eye of the wind and continue out onto the other side. But you won't have that momentum if you just sort of gently head up. So again, here's the procedure. I'm holding the main sheet, holding the tiller, let the crew know coming about, and I shove the tiller over. And then at some point, I'm going to duck down and wait for the boom to come flying overhead. It's going to come over this way. I'm going to move over to the other side of the boat. I'm going to switch hands with the tiller and the main sheet. And there's a number of ways you can do that. Some people like switching behind their back, and that way you never have to let go of the tiller and the main sheet, so a lot of newer people do that. Or what I do, and I'll show you on the boat out there, is I actually let go of the tiller. It's perfectly okay to let go of the tiller when you're coming about or tacking. Because it's such a gentle maneuver, it takes a little bit of time, and the tiller is going to be just sitting there waiting for you when you move over. So, in other words, I'll have the main sheet in one hand, the tiller in one hand, coming about, I shove the tiller over, I get up out of my seat, I duck down, and as the boom is coming across, I'm just going to let go of the tiller over here, switch hands, move to the other side of the boat. The tiller's going to be waiting for me over here when I get here, and now I've switched hands, I've switched sides. And then once the boom comes across to the other side of the boat, and it fills with air, and we're back on a close-hauled course, then I can straighten the tiller. The most important thing about coming about is not straightening the tiller until the maneuver is over. It's very difficult to do a come about or attack incorrectly. It doesn't really matter when you switch hands, it doesn't matter how you switch hands, it doesn't matter when you move from one side of the boat to the other, as long as at some point you've switched hands with the tiller and the main sheet, you've switched to the other side of the boat. But the important thing to remember, the one thing you could do wrong, is send the tiller too soon. If you send the tiller too soon, you'll be stuck in irons. So you want to make sure that when the maneuver is done, you look up and you see that the wind has actually refilled the sail and you're moving forward again, then you can straighten the tiller. So it's actually better to straighten the tiller too late than too soon. You straighten the tiller too soon, you might be stuck in irons. So let me show you real quick what this looks like on the plastic boat on the board. So here's a boat that's in a close haul position. The sail is all the way in like that, and you're on that kind of an angle to the wind. The skipper lets the crew know coming about, vigorously shoves the tiller over to the other side of the boat, and the boat starts heading up. At some point in here, the skipper is going to switch hands with the tiller and the main sheet, duck, move over to the other side of the boat. As the skipper is doing that, the boom is going to fly over to the other side of the boat. And once it gets there, and you're back on a close-hauled course, you straighten the tiller, and you're off going again. Okay? So coming about or tacking is always going from a close-hauled course to a close-hauled course, either from a port tack to a starboard tack, or from a starboard tack to a port tack. But it simply, it simply means bringing the front of the boat through the eye of the wind, through irons, onto the other side. You switch hands, you switch sides, the boom switches sides, and you're off sailing again. What happens if you get stuck in irons? And you will get stuck in irons a whole bunch of times. Not only because you might have done the come about incorrectly, but just because of wind shifting will sometimes stick you in irons. There's a lot of wind shifts out here. So what happens when you get stuck in irons? Well, you'll know that you're in irons by two different things. One is your boat isn't moving, it's just kind of sitting there. There's three things. Two is your sail is just luffing. It's not on one side of the boat, it's not on the other, it's just hanging in the middle, and it's just luffing. And three, your telltales are streaming directly back at you. Okay? That means you know you're going directly into the wind, and you're stuck in irons. So how do you get out of irons? There's two very simple ways of getting out of irons. One is since the wind is going directly towards you, you can actually reach up and grab hold of the boom and push the boom toward the wind. What that'll do is push the boat backwards a little bit on an angle, and then you'll be back on the angle with the wind and you sail, and you go off sailing again. So just pushing the boom toward the wind and hanging the boat backwards will put you back into the direction where you want to be in. That's the easiest way and that's the quickest way. However, some novice sailors don't like the idea of sailing backwards. Even though you're only sailing backwards for a couple of seconds, some people just don't like the idea of sailing backwards. That's perfectly fine. If you don't want to sail backwards, the other way of getting out of irons is by using the tiller as a little oar. It's called sculling. And what you do is you just rapidly move the tiller back and forth, but a little more rapid in one direction than the other. And what's going to happen is your boat is just going to start eking over in one direction until you're eventually back in the wind and you're out of irons on a close haul course. So again, either push the tiller toward either push the boom toward the wind and go backwards, or just use the tiller and scull your way over to one section. And you'll get stuck in irons all the time. It's no big deal. And that's pretty much the worst thing that can happen when you come about. Again, you could be hit on the head with a boom, so you want to make sure you duck and you pay attention and your crew pays attention. But a come about is a fairly gentle maneuver. Regardless of how fast the wind is blowing, the come about or tack is a gentle maneuver because it's a maneuver going into the wind. So regardless of how blustery it is out there, regardless of how fast the wind is blowing, it's only the momentum of the boat going through the eye of the wind that brings the boom over. And also, the boom doesn't have very far to go. Because you started close haul, the boom was very close in. You're ending close haul, so the boom is very close in. So A, the boom doesn't have a very big distance to travel, and B, the only thing that's moving it over is the momentum of the boat. So regardless of how windy it is, it's still a pretty gentle maneuver. If it's much windier, it'll happen much quicker. So actually, coming about on a windy day is easier and faster than coming about on a slow wind day like today. But either way, it's a fairly gentle maneuver, as opposed to the next maneuver. So and again, I will show this to you on the boat out there. But before we go into jibing, which is the other maneuver, are there any questions about tacking or coming about? It's just an exaggeration of heading up, going into the wind, and crossing through the wind onto the other side. Any questions? Okay. Let's go on to the other maneuver, which is sort of the opposite of coming about. It's very similar, but it has some subtle differences. The other one is called jibing, or jibing. In this case, it doesn't have two different words, it just has two different spellings. So you're free to spell it with a J or a G, whichever you like. So jibing, or jibing, is turning the boat through the eye of the wind, but when you're going downwind. So whereas coming about was going from a close haul course to a close haul course, jibing will actually going from a run, and a run, I forgot to mention, is when the wind is directly behind you, your sail is all the way out, your telltales are streaming straight ahead, and you're being pushed by the wind. Which is a very different thing than sailing upwind. So when you're sailing downwind, it's kind of like this boat here. The wind is simply pushing your boat forward and you're going. But it's very different than sailing upwind. Sometimes people ask, how can you sail upwind? I'll tell you real quick. When you're sailing upwind, it's a combination of the wind blowing the sail and the water pressure on the centerboard. The centerboard is this piece of metal that's sticking through the bottom of the boat. So when the wind pushes the sail, it puts water pressure on the centerboard in the opposite direction, which makes the boat move forward. That's how sailing is accomplished going into the wind. But when you're going downwind, the centerboard does absolutely nothing, and it's all about just the wind pushing the boat. So in this case, we're going to be going downwind and we're going to be on a run. So jibing is when you're on a run, and it's turning through the eye of the wind, but it's turning the back of the boat through the eye of the wind. Okay? So coming about was turning the front of the boat through the eye of the wind, ending up on the opposite tack. Jibing is you're going to be starting here, and it's going to be right here. And it's a maneuver such that the back of the boat goes through the eye of the wind, and you come out on the opposite tack. In theory, jibing is going from a run to a run, but that never really happens. So what you're actually going to do is going from a run to what's called a reach. These little downwind angles that are just off a run are called a reach. This is a drawing reach, but you don't have to remember that. So when you jibe, you're going from a run to a reach, and when you're coming about, you're going from a close haul to a close haul. The big difference is that now you've got the full force of the wind behind your sail, and the sail has a lot further distance to travel. So it's a much more energetic maneuver. I don't want to use any negative terminology like dangerous or tricky, because people tend to be afraid of jibing.